The days following that night in the office were a kaleidoscope of emotions, each one sharper and more vivid than the last. On the surface, life continued as it always had, meetings, emails, deadlines, but beneath the veneer of normalcy, everything felt different. Every interaction with Sophia was charged with an unspoken tension, a secret we both carried like a fragile glass sculpture, beautiful yet precarious. At first, we tried to maintain a semblance of professionalism. We kept our conversations strictly work-related, avoiding anything that might hint at the intimacy we'd shared. But it was impossible to ignore the way her eyes lingered on mine during presentations, or how her hand would occasionally brush against mine when passing documents. Each fleeting touch sent a jolt through me, a reminder of what we'd crossed into, and the risks we were taking. Still, the weight of reality pressed down harder with each passing day. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from tumbling into chaos. The guilt gnawed at me relentlessly, manifesting in sleepless nights and distracted afternoons. Was this worth jeopardizing everything? My career, my reputation, the carefully constructed life I'd built, it all felt dangerously close to unraveling. Then there was the fear. Fear of discovery, of judgment, of losing not just Sophia but also myself in the fallout. I imagined the whispers behind closed doors, the sideways glances, the inevitable questions. How could you let this happen? And worse still, the possibility of being labeled reckless, selfish, or naive. The thought made my stomach churn. It wasn't long before the cracks began to show. During a team meeting, I caught the sharp gaze of Rachel, a colleague known for her razor-sharp instincts and penchant for gossip. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen idly against the table as she studied Sophia and me with thinly veiled curiosity. "You two seem unusually synchronized lately," she remarked casually, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Late nights at the office paying off?" Her words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. I forced a laugh, brushing off her comment with a vague response about deadlines, but Sophia stiffened beside me, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. It was the first time I saw her falter, her usual composure slipping ever so slightly under scrutiny. For a brief moment, panic flared between us, unspoken but undeniable. After the meeting, Sophia pulled me aside, her voice low and urgent. "We need to be careful," she said, her eyes darting around the hallway to ensure no one was listening. "People notice things." "I know," I replied, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. "But how do we keep doing this without losing ourselves in the process?" She hesitated, running a hand through her hair, a rare sign of vulnerability. "I don't have all the answers, Elena. All I know is that I can't go back to pretending nothing happened. Not anymore." Her honesty was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it mirrored my own feelings, terrifying because it underscored the impossibility of our situation. How could we navigate this labyrinth of secrets and consequences without destroying everything in our path? The strain spilled over into other areas of my life as well. Friends noticed my distraction, asking if something was wrong. "You've been distant lately," my best friend, Mia, observed one evening over dinner. Her brow furrowed with concern as she sipped her wine. "Is everything okay at work?" "Yeah, fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just stressed, you know? Lots going on." Mia didn't look convinced, but she let it drop, sensing I wasn't ready to talk. Still, her question lingered in my mind, echoing louder with each passing day. Was I really okay? Or was I spiraling into something I couldn't control? And then there was my family. My mother called one Sunday afternoon, her voice warm and familiar as she asked about my latest projects and whether I'd met anyone special. The question caught me off guard, and I stumbled over my words, mumbling something vague about focusing on my career. Guilt washed over me as I hung up, realizing how far removed I'd become from the person they thought I was. Would they understand if they knew the truth? Or would they see me differently, too? Amidst the turmoil, moments of clarity emerged, brief respites where the world seemed to stand still. One such moment came late one evening when Sophia and I found ourselves alone in the office again. The hum of the city outside faded into the background as we sat together on the couch in the break room, sharing a quiet conversation about nothing and everything. What are we doing, Sophia? I asked finally, voicing the question that had haunted me for days. Where does this end? She sighed, her expression pensive. I wish I could tell you, Elena. But I think, maybe endings aren't the point. Maybe it's about choosing to move forward, even when the road ahead is uncertain. Her words resonated deeply, offering a sliver of hope amidst the chaos. Yet, they also highlighted the enormity of the choice before us. Moving forward meant embracing the unknown, stepping into a future fraught with challenges and sacrifices. Could I do it? More importantly, could we? As the weeks passed, external pressures mounted. Rumors began to circulate within the company, subtle at first, but growing louder with each passing day. A whispered comment here, a speculative glance there, it was enough to make my skin crawl. Then came the confrontation I'd been dreading. Rachel cornered me in the parking garage one evening, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Look, Elena, she began, her tone deceptively casual, I'm not one to pry, but people are talking. About you and Sophia. My heart sank, dread pooling in my stomach. What exactly are they saying? I managed to ask, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside. She shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Just that you two are close. Too close, some might say. If I were you, I'd tread carefully. You never know who's watching. Her warning lingered long after she walked away, leaving me shaken and unsure of what to do next. When I told Sophia about the encounter later that night, her reaction was immediate and fierce. We can't let them dictate our lives, she said firmly, her eyes blazing with determination. If we're going to face this, we'll do it on our terms, not theirs. Her resolve bolstered my courage, but it didn't erase the looming uncertainty. What would happen if we were discovered? Could we weather the storm together, or would the pressure tear us apart? For now, we chose to hold on, clinging to each other amidst the chaos. But every decision felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between love and survival, passion and consequence. And as the days stretched into weeks, one thing became painfully clear: the choices we made next would define not just our relationship, but the very essence of who we were. The turning point came unexpectedly, in the form of an email from HR. It was brief and formal, requesting a meeting with both Sophia and me to discuss professional conduct. My stomach dropped as I read the words, each one feeling like a weight pressing down on my chest. They knew, or at least suspected. The rumors Rachel had warned me about had reached higher ears, and now we were being called to account. I showed the email to Sophia that evening, our usual workspace transformed into a battlefield of unspoken fears. Her hands trembled slightly as she set her phone down, her jaw clenched tight. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, suffocating, filled with the ghosts of everything we'd tried so hard to protect. What do we do? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophia exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. We tell the truth, she said after a pause, her tone resolute despite the storm brewing in her eyes. No more hiding, no more pretending. If they're going to judge us, let it be for who we really are. Her words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a courage I hadn't realized I possessed. She was right, we couldn't keep living in the shadows, tiptoeing around a world that demanded conformity. But the thought of facing judgment head-on terrified me. What if this cost us everything? What if it wasn't enough? The meeting with HR was tense, their questions probing and clinical. We sat side by side, our shoulders brushing occasionally as if drawing strength from each other. When asked directly about the nature of our relationship, Sophia didn't hesitate. Elena and I care deeply for each other, she said firmly, her voice unwavering. And while we understand the complexities of our situation, we refuse to deny what we feel. Her honesty hung in the air, raw and unapologetic. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not out of shame but out of pride, for her bravery, for the love we shared, for choosing authenticity over fear. When it was my turn to speak, I echoed her sentiment, my voice steady, despite the lump in my throat. This isn't just about us, I added. It's about creating space for people to exist authentically, even when it challenges expectations. The room fell silent, the weight of our words settling over everyone present. The HR representative exchanged glances with her colleague before nodding curtly. "We'll need time to review this," she said, her tone neutral. "But thank you for your candor." Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new reality. The air seemed lighter, freer, as though we'd shed an invisible chain that had bound us for far too long. Yet, the uncertainty remained. Would they support us? Or would this mean the end of our careers at the company? Only time would tell. In the days that followed, something shifted, not just externally, but within me. The fear that had once consumed me began to loosen its grip, replaced by a quiet determination. I realized that love, real, honest love, wasn't something to be hidden or diminished. It was worth fighting for, even if it meant standing alone against the tide. Sophia and I spent hours talking about what lay ahead. Some nights, we dreamed of a future where we could be together openly, free from judgment or constraint. Other times, we prepared ourselves for the possibility of having to walk away from the lives we'd built. Whatever happened, we vowed to face it together. One evening, as we sat on the rooftop where it all began, the city lights twinkling below us like scattered stars, Sophia turned to me with a soft smile. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" she asked. "About being afraid of losing yourself?" I nodded, recalling the vulnerability I'd felt in that moment. "Yeah." "Why?" "Because I think you've found yourself again," she said gently, reaching for my hand. "You've always been strong, Elena. You just needed to trust that strength." Her words brought tears to my eyes, not because they were perfect or poetic, but because they were true. Over the course of this journey, I'd rediscovered parts of myself I'd buried under layers of doubt and fear. I'd learned to embrace vulnerability, to prioritize authenticity over approval, and to fight for what mattered most, even when it scared me. A few weeks later, the verdict came, a formal warning, a transfer to separate departments, and a directive to maintain professionalism moving forward. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't the worst-case scenario either. As we stood outside the building afterward, the late afternoon sun casting golden hues across the skyline, Sophia slipped her hand into mine. "This isn't the end," she said softly, her gaze steady and sure. "Just a new chapter." I smiled, squeezing her hand in return. "Together, right?" "Always." As we walked away, the city buzzing around us, I felt a profound sense of peace. This path wouldn't be easy, there would still be obstacles, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Because I knew who I was, and who I wanted to be, and sometimes, that's all the resolution you need. I didn't realize where I was heading until I found myself outside Elena's apartment building. It wasn't planned, my legs seemed to have a will of their own. Standing there under the awning, soaked and shivering, I debated turning around. What would I even say? "Hey, I just showed up because I'm confused and scared and can't stop thinking about you." Before I could talk myself out of it, I buzzed her unit number. "Hello?" Her voice crackled through the intercom, soft, but wary. "It's me," I said, hating how small and uncertain I sounded. There was a pause, long enough to make my heart sink. But then the door clicked open, and I stepped inside, shaking off the rain as I climbed the stairs to her floor. Elena stood in the doorway, her hair tied back in a loose bun, wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed, but still achingly beautiful. "Claire," she said, her tone cautious. "What are you doing here?" I don't know," I admitted, clutching the strap of my bag like a lifeline. "I needed to see you." For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. Her apartment was warm and inviting, filled with books stacked precariously on shelves and plants spilling over windowsills. A record player hummed softly in the corner, playing something jazzy and melancholy. Despite the coziness, though, there was an underlying tension in the air, thick and suffocating. "Do you want tea or something?" she asked, avoiding my gaze as she moved toward the kitchen. "No, thank you," I replied, staying rooted near the door. "Elena, we need to talk." She froze mid-step, her back to me. When she turned around, her face was guarded, her jaw clenched. About what? About us, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. You've been distant lately. Is everything okay? She sighed heavily, running a hand through her hair. Claire, but she didn't finish. Instead, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I sat beside her, my heart pounding. Whatever it is, you can tell me. Please. After a long silence, Elena finally spoke, her voice barely audible. I haven't been honest with you, she began, her words halting and strained. When I said I swore off vulnerability after my marriage ended, that wasn't entirely true. I waited, holding my breath. The truth is, she continued, her voice cracking, I haven't dated anyone since my divorce because I haven't wanted to. Not until now. My stomach flipped, hope and fear colliding in equal measure. But it's not just about being scared of getting hurt again, she went on. It's... God, this is going to sound crazy. Try me, I urged gently. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. I think I might be falling for you, Claire. And it terrifies me. The room seemed to tilt, the world narrowing to just the two of us. Her confession hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, leaving me speechless. I've spent so long convincing myself that love isn't worth the pain, she said, tears welling in her eyes. But then you came along, and suddenly all those walls I built feel like they're crumbling. And I don't know what to do with that. Her honesty shattered something inside me, breaking down the barriers I hadn't even realized I'd erected. Without thinking, I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. You're not alone in this, I whispered, my own voice thick with emotion. I'm terrified too. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means we're onto something real. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the conflict raging in her eyes, fear warring with desire, doubt battling hope. I don't want to mess this up, she admitted. You mean too much to me already. Then don't, I said simply. Let's figure it out together. For a moment, neither of us moved. The weight of the moment pressed down on us, heavy and undeniable. And then, slowly, Elena leaned in, closing the gap between us. This time, she didn't pull away. Her lips brushed mine tentatively, hesitantly, as if testing the waters. But when I responded, leaning into the kiss, she relaxed, her hand cupping my cheek as the tension melted away. It wasn't perfect. It was clumsy and imperfect and utterly human. But it was ours. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing heavily, Elena rested her forehead against mine. That was, she trailed off, laughing softly. Unexpected? I offered, smiling, despite the tears streaming down my face. Overdue, she corrected, brushing a strand of wet hair from my cheek. We stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the reality of what had just happened settle over us. There were still so many questions, so many uncertainties ahead. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, painting soft stripes across Elena's bedroom floor. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything that had happened the night before pressing down on me like a second skin. My body felt foreign yet familiar, as if it belonged to someone braver, someone who knew how to navigate these uncharted waters without hesitation. But here I was, Claire, the cautious planner, the woman who always played it safe, lying in bed next to someone who made my heart race and my thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. Elena slept soundly beside me, her breathing slow and steady. Her arm was draped loosely over my waist, her fingers brushing against my hip. It was an innocent gesture, one born of trust rather than possession, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me all the same. Every inch of her presence felt monumental, like she'd carved out a space in my soul that I hadn't known existed until now, and yet, despite the warmth radiating from her, a cold knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. What did this mean for us? Was last night a turning point or just another step into uncertainty? Would we wake up and pretend nothing had changed, or would we face the truth head-on? When Elena finally stirred, blinking sleepily as sunlight spilled across her face, I held my breath. She turned toward me, her lips curving into a sleepy smile that made my heart skip a beat. Hey, she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. Hey, I replied, trying to match her casual tone but failing miserably. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched taut between us, heavy with unspoken questions. Then Elena propped herself up on one elbow, studying me with those piercing eyes that always seemed to see straight through me. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, though the motion felt mechanical. "Yeah. Just processing." She chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Join the club." Her attempt at humor eased some of the tension, but not enough to dispel the lingering unease, so I began, hesitating. "What happens now?" It was a loaded question, one I wasn't sure I was ready to hear the answer to. But Elena didn't flinch. Instead, she reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think we owe it to ourselves, and to each other, to figure it out. Together." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a promise. For the first time since walking into her apartment yesterday, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. We spent the morning tangled in sheets, talking about everything and nothing. Elena told me stories about her childhood, how she used to climb trees and sketch pictures of birds, dreaming of becoming an artist before life steered her toward graphic design. I shared memories of my own, like the summer I spent learning to bake with my grandmother, only to burn every single loaf of bread I attempted. We laughed, we cried, we marveled at how much we still had to learn about each other. By the time we emerged from her apartment, the rain had stopped, leaving the city glistening under a pale blue sky. The air smelled fresh, almost hopeful, as if the storm had washed away the heaviness of the past few weeks. "Where to?" Elena asked, slipping her hand into mine as we stepped onto the sidewalk. I shrugged, smiling, despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. "Anywhere. Everywhere." As idyllic as the day felt, reality inevitably crept back in. Over lunch at a small cafe, Elena's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at the screen, her expression darkening instantly. "It's my ex," she muttered, shoving the device back into her bag without reading the message. My stomach sank. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head, picking at her food with disinterest. "Not really. He's just persistent. Even after everything." The bitterness in her voice caught me off guard. Until now, Elena had spoken of her marriage with a detached sort of resignation, as if it were a chapter of her life she'd closed long ago. But this was different. "He's been texting me lately," she confessed reluctantly. "Saying he misses me, wants to work things out. Like none of it ever happened." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because I doubted her feelings for me, I knew, deep down, that what we shared was real, but because it reminded me of the fragility of our situation. No matter how strong our connection felt, there were forces outside of us that could threaten to pull us apart. "And what do you want?" I asked carefully, dreading the answer. Elena looked at me then, her gaze unwavering. "I want this," she said firmly. "Us. Whatever this is, however messy it gets, I want it more than anything." Her conviction soothed some of my fears, but not all of them. Because even as she reassured me, I couldn't shake the feeling that her ex wasn't going to disappear quietly. That evening, we attended a gallery opening downtown. A mutual friend of ours was showcasing their work, and Elena insisted it would be good for both of us to get out and socialize. Reluctantly, I agreed, though the thought of being around strangers left me uneasy. The gallery was crowded, filled with people sipping wine and discussing abstract paintings in hushed tones. Elena navigated the room with ease, introducing me to artists and collectors alike. I tried to keep up, nodding politely and offering generic compliments when appropriate, but my mind kept drifting back to earlier conversations. At one point, Elena excused herself to use the restroom, leaving me alone near a sculpture that looked vaguely like a bird mid-flight. As I stood there, pretending to admire it, a man approached me. "You must be Claire," he said, his voice smooth and confident. I turned, startled. "Yes. Do I know you?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Daniel. Elena's husband." The word husband hit me like ice water. Though I'd known he existed, hearing him refer to himself that way felt surreal, almost intrusive. "We haven't officially met," he continued, extending his hand. But I've heard a lot about you. I shook his hand awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Up close, he was handsome in a polished, corporate kind of way, but there was something unsettling about his demeanor, like he was sizing me up, searching for weaknesses. Well, nice to meet you, I managed, taking a step back. Before he could respond, Elena reappeared, her expression hardening the moment she saw him. Daniel, she said curtly. What are you doing here? He smirked, raising his glass in mock salute. Just enjoying the art. And catching up with your friend. The emphasis he placed on the word friend made my skin crawl. Elena stepped closer to me, her body shielding mine instinctively. This isn't the place for this, she snapped. No, it's not, he agreed, his tone deceptively calm. But I'll be seeing you soon, Elena. Count on it. With that, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Once we were safely outside, away from prying eyes, Elena let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry, she said, running a hand through her hair. I didn't think he'd show up tonight. It's fine, I lied, though my hands were trembling. It's not fine, she countered, her voice tinged with frustration. He has no right to insert himself into my life, or yours. Especially not now. Her protectiveness warmed me, but it also highlighted the complexity of our situation. Daniel wasn't just a ghost from Elena's past, he was a living, breathing reminder of the ties that bound her to a life she'd worked so hard to leave behind. What does he want? I asked quietly. Elena hesitated, her jaw tightening. I don't know. Maybe closure. Maybe revenge. Either way, I won't let him ruin what we have. Her determination gave me strength, but it also reminded me of the challenges ahead. Love, I realized, wasn't just about joy and passion, it was about resilience, about choosing to fight for something even when the odds felt insurmountable. And as we walked home together, hand in hand, I knew we were ready to face whatever came next.